what's real and what's not at this point in the season with this group and what they've done.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest difference right now that you can see in the way that they're playing is the familiarity is a huge thing. I mean, we saw how important it was for the Nuggets last year and their run to the title, but last year was very disjointed for this group, trying to learn Rudy Gobert, trying to figure out how to work this two big lineup. Like you had Karl-Anthony Towns miss 50 games. Towns and Gobert were both out in training camp with injuries. And so they just never felt like they got any kind of solid ground underneath them. Now coming back in year two, people, they have Mike Conley at point guard, which has been a huge thing for them to just organize to help empower Rudy Gobert and do those things. But Rudy is healthier. He is moving really, really well outside of last night on the second night of a back-to-back. But it just feels like a team that knows its identity a little bit more, that it's that the identity is on defense. They are so long with Gobert and Towns and McDaniels. Edwards is big. They have just a lot of length to bother people. And so when you look at reasons to believe that this start that they are on is not just, a hot streak that so many teams go through in a long season, and theirs is just happening to come at the beginning. I think everybody looks at the defensive weapons that they have and how sustainable that model is. And so if they can keep building on that, I mean, they've already beaten Golden State at home twice. They've beaten Denver, they've beaten Boston, they beat Miami without Jimmy Butler, but they have some real wins on their resume to say that, hey, this maybe isn't a fluke. This isn't just a little flash in the pan, that this is a team that's kind of come together and figured some things out.
Yeah, they're first in defense, 18th in offense. So we know what the identity is. They have two guys who you can they just score late, right? Like the Warriors in a lot of ways outplayed them in the second game after all the ejections, but just late. They didn't have, they had Steph was obviously out, Clay and Draymond ejected. They didn't have like go-to guys to close it out. The Wolves did, right? Towns hit two huge threes, and then Edwards made that play, for the Conley corner three, and they just, they kind of steal that win. And that's what good playoff teams do, right? They have great defensive rating, and in a clutch game, they finish you off. I would want to ask about McDaniels, because he doesn't play obviously after the ejection, but what was his contract?
Is 5 years, 130 million or so. So it was 100. So he's really at like about 27 per year going.
That's
forward.
A huge commitment for a team that isn't just like, hey, we got room, why not? Right? I mean, they're in a very complicated financial situation, but view him so in such good light and of such a importance long term that they committed that type of money. Tell me about his growth and what he is becoming. And then also, I mean, we should probably flip it into like, what are like, it's kind of a weird time for them long term. Like, where does this go financially?
Yeah, I mean, for McDaniels specifically, he's been terrific when he's not getting thrown out of games. He is a super long. He's almost 6'10" now, and he can guard. He guarded Steph on Sunday. He guards Luka. He guards James Harden. He guards the best perimeter player every game, and he usually makes things very tough on them. I know Steph had 38, but I think he had to work really hard for those 38. He had 5 turnovers as well, so trying to make it tough on him. But here's the difference with McDaniels that sets him apart is, he can do it on the defensive end, and he's really, really good on that end, but he can also make shots. He shot 40% from 3 last season. He has a little bit more in his bag this year in terms of cutting, getting to the basket, in the mid-range game a little bit. So they really think that he's a two-way player, that he can be a guy that you put next to Anthony Edwards for a very long time, and that's a building block. And so to get to your other point of, why did they commit this kind of money to him, given that Towns and Gobert on max deals, given that Anthony Edwards is on a max deal? If you look at kind of the construction of the team, yes, right now, like this is kind of a win now group, because you have Conley and Gobert who are older. Towns is like now in his prime at 28 years old. and it's kind of go time. But they also then view it as, you know, as Gobert phases out of his contract, as if Conley has to move on, if a few of the other veterans go out, you still have McDaniels, who's 24 or 23, Naz Reid is 24, and Anthony Edwards is 22. And so there's that young group and core that will eventually kind of graduate and take over. It's just a matter of, is it right now? Is it next year? Is it 2 or 3 years from now? That's going to be the interesting thing to see how quickly they have to kind of shift gears financially that way.
John, to that point, what is your updated opinion on the organization's view of its own payroll? Because, we get caught up in the action and the emotion that comes with, hey, this team's pretty good. And so you give them the respect they deserve right now on the floor. But Tim Conley, head of the Wolves front office, and his staff, they obviously never lose sight of the long-term plan and just the books, if you will. The narrative coming into the season, which is that it was only a matter of time before they would inevitably have to send Karl Anthony Towns somewhere for both financial reasons and then maybe just to try something new. But I don't know, man. I'm around that team for a couple days. And again, I'm a prisoner of the moment, admittedly, right now. But Chris Finch talking ad nauseum about all the things Karl has done this season to improve the collective. You don't often hear coaches talk about star players and the little things. I mean, he's talking about, being vertical on defense and being willing to guard on the perimeter more than before, and allow them to do things defensively that they couldn't do last season. He's talking about setting screens and getting grimy and mainly lauding Karl for checking his ego at the door and doing what this group needs. So in the moment, it's kind of a neat little story how they're seemingly coming together a bit, but that doesn't change the books. I don't have the collective math in front of me, but even just, man, if you I'm looking at the 2025, 26 season and just to focus on the core, I mean, you'd be paying Rudy Gobert $46 million, Karl $53 million, Anthony Edwards $38 million, and then, oh, by the way, if Naz Reid, or when he picks up that option, that's 15. They just got a lot of massive numbers on the books, and we all know the second apron is always looming. Just how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated for sure. Right now, I think that you can look at it and say, why are they in this position? Well, they're in this position because they want Anthony Edwards to be winning games as a young player and be, getting into playoff series and going deeper into the playoffs. And if he is truly going to be the number one guy on this for this franchise for the foreseeable future, you can't have him wasting away in lottery seasons. And so I think in some ways it's been mission accomplished because they want to be competitive and they want to put Edwards in that position to learn and to grow, and so he can be ready. And so, but that also leads to the point of, this is a very, very big year for this roster as currently constructed. They have to win a lot of games and have success in the playoffs to have a chance to stay together, because that second apron is coming. They need to really see a viable path toward a huge playoff gates and ticket receipts and generating a lot of revenue that way to justify keeping this group together. I know this is a big conversation with people, among the national scene about looking at what the Timberwolves perspective, but I do think that there's one thing that everyone is kind of missing, is that this team has been out of the first round of the playoffs one time in its entire existence. This is the 35th year of the franchise. You need to really change the identity of how this whole franchise is being perceived. And so I see why they want to be aggressive here, and keeping Karl Anthony Towns gives them an opportunity to match up better against Denver, to really kind of get into playoff series and have a chance to win them for the first time since Kevin Garnett was in his prime here. And so I think there's real value in that. Now, there may be some things that they have to do down the road to pay for that success, but they have not had any success. And so if they can start to build some sort of foundation and of success and change the perceptions of this team while you're kind of catapulting Anthony Edwards into stardom, that gives them a chance to build on it going forward, no matter what they have to do financially. So I think it makes a lot more sense than maybe some people kind of at first blush, kind of look at without knowing the whole context.
What's the ownership like dynamic right now,
Mhm.
and how does that play into all this?
Yeah, I mean, that's another complicated issue. Right now, Glenn Taylor is still the owner, but by December 31st of this year, Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez can exercise their final option to buy the last 40% of the team and become majority owners, which would likely happen in the spring of this year as the whole transaction is completed and assuming it gets league approval. We don't know exactly yet what kind of financial uh, buying power they bring with them. We can assume it's not Steve Ballmer level money. We can assume as of right now they don't have Lacob level money because they don't have a new arena.
Hey,
Uh,
they acting like they do.
they are, yeah,
So
they're
maybe they
spending.
do. I don't know.
And they could, yeah. We like they have sort of been a little bit more under the radar right now, just because technically they do not own the team yet, but they have certainly factored big time in the decision making. They were the ones that recruited Tim Connolly from Denver to Minnesota and gave him a hefty financial package to do it. They absolutely have been consulted and are firmly, in on paying Jaden McDaniels what they paid him, on paying Naz Reid what they paid him. So they're absolutely involved and fully aware of the price tag that is coming. Here's what they have going for them though. They came in and they bought into the Timberwolves on a $1.6 billion evaluation. Right
That's low.
now,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
low.
right now they probably already have almost $1 billion in equity. I mean, it's a $2.5 billion asset at least. And so if they continue winning, if they start to look at things like new arenas and stuff, it goes well north of 3 billion. So they have a lot of they got a great deal on it, and that is going to give them some sort of spending power, financial solvency that might be harder to come by had to purchase it at 2.5 billion dollars, and go for it that way.